listening to TMRP on Metropolis Radio, and today we have a very packed show for you. We are talking about Shazam 2 bombing opening weekend, along with The Mandalorian Season 3 underperforming in the ratings, along with other Star Wars stuff, and an executive at Marvel just walks out of the company. This and much more coming up on this episode of TMRP on Metropolis Radio, so stay tuned. So let's start off today by talking about the shocking news, and that is Marvel Studios' veteran Victoria Alonso just exits. She has served as executive producer on its titles since the first Avengers movie. I'm pulling all this information from an article in The Hollywood Reporter, by the way. Victoria Alonso, the longtime and high-profile Marvel Studios executive whose time with the company dates back to the first Iron Man, has left the studio, multiple sources tell The Hollywood Reporter. The reasons for the exit are unclear, but she parted ways with Marvel on Friday, sources say. So on Friday, let me pull up my calendar here just to make sure. That would be Friday, March 17th of 2023 for those of you that are watching this in the future or listening to this in the future. However, you're getting this content from here on out. And the reasons for the exit are unclear. I will be getting into my opinion on the reasons why she exited by the end here. Alonzo had been with the company since the earliest days of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, establishing an enviable 17-year run and watching the studio grow from operating above a Mercedes-Benz dealership in Beverly Hills to being acquired by Disney. During her tenure, the MCU became the highest-grossing franchise in film history. Alonso joined the studio in 2006 as Chief of Visual Effects in Post-Production and helped launch the Marvel Cinematic Universe as co-producer on 2008's Iron Man. Now, just remember this point. She joined the studio in 2006 as Chief of Visual Effects in Post-Production because this will come back later. This will be important. She also served as co-producer on Iron Man 2, Thor, and Captain America: The First Avenger. Alonso was up to executive producer on The Avengers, the landmark film that grossed $1.5 billion and took Marvel to new heights, proving that the concept of a shared cinematic universe could really work. Yeah, basically reviving a concept that was around in the 1930s with the Universal monster movies. You know, who remembers those Universal monster movies from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s?
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Alonso has served as executive producer on Marvel's subsequent releases and also worked on its Disney Plus TV series. In 2021, she was promoted to president physical and post-production, visual effects, and animation production. Boy, that's a mouthful. Imagine the plaque for that job at the company, right? You have president, and then you have this big square that has to fit physical and post-production, visual effects and animation production, all within a tiny little square under a little tiny little gold plaque that says president. Last year, she also produced the Oscar-nominated international feature Argentina in 1985. Her departure comes in the shadow of Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania's poor showing at the box office and among critics and fans. In addition to her behind-the-scenes work, Alonso has been an important ambassador for the studio's representation efforts and was outspoken during Florida's dispute with Florida over its quote-unquote "Don't Say Gay" bill. Quote, "As long as I am at Marvel Studios, I will fight for representation," Alonso, who is gay, said at the time. She was named one of people on. I don't care about that. For those of you that don't recognize the name Victoria Alonso, she was the executive at Marvel Studios that felt that the name X-Men was outdated. And no, I am not lying. Here is the clip of her actually saying that.
So you guys have a lot of toys to play with now in the future, including the X-Men, right?
Yes.
Could you, of course you can't tell me much, but can you give me a little hint of what the future is coming? Where is the future going and the excitement?
I don't know where the future is going. It's funny that people call it the X-Men. There's a lot of female superheroes in that X-Men group, so I think it's outdated.
So where do I think that this is coming from, right? A very high-level executive at a company just doesn't just up and walk out all of a sudden. I think a lot of this ties back to the news that is now almost a year old. But people have been pointing out that Marvel has a VFX problem. You know, as Phase 4 has faltered, the MCU's effects-heavy visuals and the ways in which they're produced have drawn increased scrutiny. How many people have been criticizing the fact that the CGI now looks like total crap in all of the Marvel movies? And then after this article from The Ringer came out, this was on July 21st, 2022, Marvel has a VFX problem. I'm not going to read it to you word for word. This article from The Guardian comes out, titled "Bullying is a Problem. Visual Effects Artists Speak Out Against Marvel," published on the 3rd of August, 2022, so literally within just a couple of weeks. The rise of VFX professionals discussing mistreatment at the hands of Marvel has led to increased calls for unionization. And there are a few quotes in here. Let me see. Let me see. One person here, working on Marvel shows is what pushed me to leave the VFX industry, tweeted Drew, I'm going to mispronounce this name, Drew Goville, a visual effects artist who contributed to movies including Guardians of the Galaxy and Spider-Man Homecoming. They're a horrible client, and I've seen way too many colleagues break down after being overworked while Marvel tightens the purse strings. Goville added, quote, "The issue is Marvel is too big and can demand whatever they want. It's a toxic relationship." Another visual effects artist who wished to remain anonymous told New York Magazine's Vulture website, quote, "When I worked on one movie, it was almost 6 months of overtime every day. I was working 7 days a week, averaging 64 hours a week on a good week. Marvel genuinely works you really hard. I've had coworkers sit next to me, break down, and start crying. I've had people having anxiety attacks on the phone." Let me see here. Here we go. Here's the next one right here. The visual effects industry is filled with terrific people with lots of goodwill who really care, but at the end of the day, there's nothing in place when their backs are up against the wall, and Disney is making crazy demands. Another visual effects artist says by the phone. All the goodwill in the world just evaporates when everything gets changed and they decide they're replacing that character with a different actor or changing the entire environment. They're now in a pizza restaurant instead of a cornfield. It can be that extreme at the very last minute. Yeah, that's never a good client to work for. Something that I've never really expressed on this channel. I was a professional photographer off and on for the last 14 years of my life, because I started when I was 12 years old, and I'm going to be 27 this year. So yeah, 14, 15 years. And I have had clients that have done that, where, you know, we'll go out, we'll do the photo shoot, and then later on you deliver the images, and then they're like, "No, I actually wanted it done this way and that way." I'll even have it, they'll even be out on location, and they'll start, you know, acting like this and start to be like a little Hitler. Yeah, the best thing to do in that scenario is just basically just sever ties with them. The amount of money that you're going to make off that one client is not worth it. I don't care if you're making like $10,000 off that photo shoot. It's not worth the fucking ulcers in my experience. Here we go. Pavlo, who's from the U.S. but has lived in London. It can be characterized as bullying, but filtered through multiple layers of management and supervisor and hierarchy. Quote, "It's not like the executive from Disney is grabbing someone and swearing at them or something like that. It's more like an atmosphere where everybody feels like this is the most desperately important thing, and if we don't do it, we're all fucked. The average artist doesn't even have any contact with the clients. It's really just the people at the producer and supervisor level, and then they pass it on to their crew. So you could say, oh, the supervisor's a real bully, but actually it's a knock-on effect, and then the people who are the team leaders, once they can't handle it, end up being bullies. Bullying is a huge problem in our industry because everybody's so desperate sometimes. It seems like there's such a high level of stress and pressure on these jobs to complete on time, to change everything at the drop of a hat." And yes, when I worked as a professional photographer, again, off and on for the last 14, 15 years, I have had clients that did that. So I can really feel for VFX artists. Again, the difference between a VFX artist and photographer, it's like comparing apples to oranges, but it's the same thing. You're doing contract work, so it is similar in that regard. And finally, you have this article from The Direct that literally came out today, as I'm recording, it's March 21st. Well, actually, this is going up on March 22nd. So March 21st, as I'm recording it, March 20th. So it'll be March 22nd when you're listening to these. Marvel Studios' toxic workplace accusations arise following exec shakeup. And I think that this is the real meat and potatoes for why Victoria Alonso is basically gone from Marvel. After Victoria Alonso's sudden departure, Lee, I think it's Chris Lee, if I'm remembering correctly. Let me click on this link here. I want to make sure I'm getting his name right. Chris Lee, who's a contributor to the Direct. After Victoria Alonso's sudden departure, Lee went on Twitter to say that, quote, Victoria Alonso was singularly responsible for Marvel's toxic work environment. Quote, so many VFX sources have told me that Victoria Alonso was singularly responsible for Marvel's toxic work environment. A kingmaker who rewarded unquestioning fealty with an avalanche of work, but who also maintained the blacklist that kept FX pros wild-eyed with fear. She held a crazy amount of power, bigfooting all major creative decisions on Marvel movies and shows. Kevin Feige and Victoria Alonso personally approve every single shot, all the visual effects work, which is usually the job of a director or showrunner, one tech told me. The main one that everyone's quite scared of is Victoria Alonso. If she likes you, you're going to get work and you're going to move up in the industry. If you have pissed her off in any way, you are going to get frozen out. And there's a point that this article brings up, and it's a very, very good point. I think I'll end off with this. Is Marvel just turning Victoria Alonso into a scapegoat? I'll read this from the article. It's only a few paragraphs. It certainly seems a tad ridiculous that Victoria Alonso could be, as Chris Lee bluntly put it, quote-unquote, singularly responsible for the toxic environment at Marvel Studios. But unfortunately, this makes it look like she's becoming a scapegoat for the studio's current problems. It's not as if once she's gone, it'll solve all the supposed toxicity at the studio. Instead, her departure could be in reaction to the major box office disappointment of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which was heavily criticized for its VFX. Moreover, Kevin Feige was also responsible for supposedly micromanaging VFX teams, the same as Alonso, and he still holds his position at the studio. Is her ouster meant to appease shareholders or Disney CEO Bob Iger as a show of force? It's possible, but it could be that Alonso left voluntarily. After all, she does have a career outside Marvel Studios, being one producer for Argentina in 1985. You know, and this is a very good point, that, you know, that her leaving Marvel makes her look like that she's becoming a scapegoat for the studio's current problems. Here is, honest to goodness, the biggest problem that Marvel is facing right now that they cannot get around. For the vast majority of people, the MCU ended with Avengers Endgame. That is a mountain that you are never going to conquer. What Marvel should have done, they should have genuinely went away for a few years. Don't produce a single movie or Disney Plus show or, you know, anything. Maybe they can do something in animation, but still, you know, don't do anything MCU related for the next 4 to 5 years, right? And then after that, then come back with a smaller movie like Iron Man. Then if that does well, come out with another small movie, and then another small movie, and then another small movie, and then bam, you team them up again, and then people go, oh, so this was the new plan the whole time. You slowly ease them into it, like what they did with Phase 1, right? Right, the Avengers originally started as a rumor. People forget about this. You know, post-credit scenes were not a thing in 2008. So the vast majority of people that went to see Iron Man never saw the post-credit scene where Tony Stark and Nick Fury, I almost forgot his name, Tony Stark and Nick Fury meet to talk about the Avengers, or the post-credit scene at the end of The Incredible Hulk when Tony Stark goes into the bar to say, you know, I'm building a new team. Again, post-credit scenes were not a thing, and the online chatter at the time was, well, all of these Marvel movies are building up to the Avengers, and it's like, no way they're doing a team-up movie. Then the Avengers comes out in 2012. The MCU becomes the biggest movie franchise on the frickin' planet after that. And then it all culminates in Avengers Endgame, which, once again, the title of the movie, Endgame, so the vast majority of people are saying, well, this is where the MCU ended, right? Good luck conquering that freaking mountain. Marvel Studios, if you think your sole problem is the fact that your visual effects are starting to suck, you are in for a very, very rude awakening within the very relative short term.